Let's go again. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Dean Lloyd from Lloyd Consulting. And today's guest is April Long, and I invited her on because I wanted to discuss the work that she's doing at the moment with Smart Recovery. Hey, April, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on. Excited to have a yarn about the work we do here at Smart.
Cool. Can you just let everybody know a little bit about you and who you are and what your actual role is at Smart Recovery, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yama, everyone. My name's April Long. I'm joining you from beautiful Warramai and Awabakal country. So want to pay respects to elders here, both past and present, and where everyone's dialing in from. A little bit about me. So my mob's actually from the Central Coast and Mid-North Coast of New South Wales. So beautiful Darkinjung and Gumbaynggirr country. And I'm right in the middle here in Newcastle, working for an incredible organisation called Smart Recovery Australia. So we support people, any problematic behaviour in terms of their recovery. So drugs, alcohol, gambling. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here. Prior to that, I worked for an incredible organisation called Shine for Kids, supporting children with a parent in prison. I have lived experience of both parental addiction and incarceration. If I look back to my childhood, I was always very passionate about, community healing, social justice, always getting involved in my community. I actually went off and did a law degree, so lawyer by training. But I didn't want to be at that pointy end, when people were already before the courts. I wanted to get in and work earlier, which is why I think I've worked for the last 15 years in the not-for-profit space.
Yeah, nice. And I think where we connected was around Shine, and I was working with some people who had parents in prison. And what really did, lack of a pun, but shine through around meeting you and understanding you is definitely the passion that you have for the work, and sort of the common theme with everybody that comes on. Staying with the theme of employment, can you remember your first job?
Yeah, my first job, I was a Domino's chick. So, in my community, you kind of had people went and worked at Macca's or they worked at KFC, and I worked at Domino's. And as soon as I was 14 and 9 months, I started working at Domino's. When I was about 16, I had some housing instability and went into a women's refuge, a young women's refuge, which is run by Coast Shelter now. The girls would love it because I'd come back with all of the pizzas. I was always really popular in there. But yeah, it was great. I, started working, young. And yeah, it was a good job that taught me quite a lot. But yeah, made me very popular with the girls in there, which was good.
Can you remember how much you got paid the first week or whatever your first paycheck was?
I can't remember, but I remember it wasn't much. And I remember the most clearly thing was when I won, there was a garlic bread upsell competition. So, now in my role, I do a lot of pitching to philanthropists, and I think I developed that skill set very early. So I actually won the New South Wales competition for the biggest upsell around garlic breads. I got a $50 voucher, which, back then was incredible. So that's what I remember most in terms of what I was paid. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Congratulations. Well done on the voucher. And so over the years and the jobs that you've had, is there one that sort of you really enjoyed, like that really shines out and was a favorite or that you like to do the most?
I think I've been really fortunate to always really work with good people. And I think for me, I'm always heart-led in the work that I do. And so, when I was working for a corporate law firm, I learn a lot, and it was a great corporate law firm, but I knew that it wasn't going to be, what I wanted to do long term in terms of making an impact in community. So, if I think from the roles that I didn't really enjoy as much. As soon as I was working in community, and supporting people, based on similar situations I'd been in myself, that's where I bring that lived experience with, what you kind of learn in terms of the research and the evidence and all of that stuff. That's where I'm most happy. And, I got to do that at the National Centre of Indigenous Excellence in Redfern, working with, young mob and, keeping them fit and healthy and connected to education. And that set me up really well for Shine for Kids. And I think, it's the invisible victims of crime, children with a parent in prison. And, if I think of those kind of dots that connected up, it was when I was at Shine and I saw so many mob, with drug and alcohol issues that were getting no support, mums, dads, aunties, uncles. It just felt really right in terms of smart recovery. So, I don't think you're supposed to have favorites in terms of any roles, but for me, smart recovery has been that real opportunity to get in early. And, if I think about my dad and, he's 12 years sober now. And for him, sober means abstinence. It doesn't mean that for all of us. It can be self-management. But I think, if he'd had something like smart recovery, he may not have ended up, incarcerated. He may not have had challenges with, family violence and domestic violence. And so, yeah, I'd probably say smart recovery now. But all of those roles that I just kind of had a yarn about, have helped develop, who I am and, what I'm passionate about. And I'm sure, if we were having a yarn in a couple of years later, it will change. And I think that's the beautiful thing about when you're working for purpose and you're being heart-led is that, you'll find things that and people that you want to connect with and, do incredible work with. And that's what I've been fortunate to do.
Yeah, and I think, I won't talk for you, but I know my experience of, substance abuse, incarceration, all that sort of stuff. It really, it gave me the ability to be resourceful and resilient. And I'm guessing that is a byproduct of sort of your upbringing, talking to philanthropists and all that sort of stuff, and having the confidence and understanding how to get, when you need something, how to get it. How, looking back or hindsight, keeping those transferable skills from such like and building on them, where like was that young when you as young as you can remember when your parents were sort of in a bit of strife with substances?
Yeah, I think, we people talk about adverse childhood experiences a lot, and there's always that deficit kind of
Yeah.
lens, disadvantage or, homelessness or domestic violence or parental incarceration. And, I experienced all of those things. But what I also experienced was community, was connection, resilience, and I think that, yeah, sometimes we can just think in that deficit way. And, I think I got taught those skills really early, but I had all these incredible mentors with me along the way as well. And so that's probably the other thing that I would kind of call out is that, I had an incredible group of teachers who wrapped support around me. I went into an independent living program. I mentioned the young women's homeless shelter that I was in, that Coast Shelter runs. So I think what we probably don't do well enough is that connected service system where, we are holistically kind of looking after a person. I had to kind of go here and there. And so, but it certainly made me resilient. I think it certainly gave me that passion for social justice, and a bit of that fire as well to want to break the cycle, and I think that's probably what carried me to law school. And, I then decided, well, where did I want to be making a change? And if it wasn't for all of those experiences, I don't think I'd be who I am. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so have you got brothers and sisters? Where are you in the chain of all of that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of like right in the middle. So I have quite a kind of um blended family, I guess people would
Yeah,
call it,
yeah.
but we all grew up together and my cousins are I call my cousin cuz sis, and so I've got, over 15 first cousins, but yeah, I've got four sisters. Well, I've got five sisters and three brothers. And so yeah, there's some twins in there.
Wow.
My younger brother, my mum took him on. He's my cousin's child, and he's been brought up with us. And yeah, my dad also, I've got two sisters and a brother there. So I probably haven't done the maths right, but yeah, there's a big mob of
Well, you
us.
haven't forgotten anyone. That's the main thing.
There's a big mob of us, and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I love being an auntie. I love all my nieces and nephews, and growing up with siblings. I'm a mum now. I've got one.
yeah,
And it's such a contrast. I always say, I don't know how our aunties did it, with four or five
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
All my aunties had, four or five. And whereas, yeah, this next generation coming through, we're having one or two, or, so, but yeah, there's a lot of us. So my mob of Bartletts and Slaters. So, yeah, there's quite a lot right up the mid North Coast and yeah, down to the Central Coast.
Nice. I've been lucky enough to sort of work in community and been invited in to participate. And it's a really I love the community that is First Nations. So yeah, and always be I work with a couple of girls, both she's one of nine and she's got nine as well. So like I played netball with them and everything. So yeah, it's an interesting interesting dynamic, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I remember one time we were all, hanging out at my auntie's place, and Mr. Whippy turned up, and instead of just getting us all, because there was too many of us, individual ice cream, she just took out a big pot and said, fill this up. How much to fill this up, So, we're
Uh,
always sharing. We never went without. But yeah, look, I don't think I'll be having five. But yeah, it's great to be in community and have that connection, and to grow up. And, I guess what I'm really passionate about now at Smart is, how do we develop the tools to be, if we are, hanging out with family, and whether it's sorry business or it's a birthday, and you want to make different decisions around alcohol or drugs, like how do we give each other the tools to be able to do that, and to break some of those cycles, some of those intergenerational cycles, and not do that with stigma or shame, but support one another, and connect into culture, and the things that keep us strong and healthy. So that's really my focus at Smart Recovery. And I really love that quote that, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. you
yeah,
know,
so true.
yeah. How do we build up that connection for each other, but for ourselves? So yeah, that's a big focus of my life. And we have the 4 C's of our Yarn Smart program, which is culture, community, connection, and country. And for me, it's like, how am I living those as well?
Yeah,
We don't have 12 steps like AA. We've got 4 points of our program, and yeah, it's something I'm always reflecting on. And how can I be the best I can be for my son, but for all those nieces and nephews as well.
yeah, and I think that's really poignant what you've just said around, and from what I've learned is, culture as a protective factor, and if someone drew a circle once and put a dot in it, and the closer you to the middle with the culture, the further you're away. Like there was no alcohol, there was no drugs until us white fellas come. So just that sort of stuff, it's heartwarming to hear you bringing that into your communities.
Yeah, and I think I was really blessed when I come to Smart Recovery that Dr. Liz Dale, she's a Warramah woman, she'd done her PhD on the cultural competency of Smart. And it wasn't that it was broken, like it was a pretty solid program. But what we've been able to do with our Aboriginal Action Group is really look at, well, how do we make it a safe space for mob? We've also got youth meetings, we've got LGBTIQ meetings. Like when you think about peer support, when you're sitting circle with someone and you're wanting to share what works for you and how you've been able to get to where you're at, you've got to be able to relate to one another, and that's why all of our meetings, the facilitator, they're not there to tell you what to do, but rather help the group kind of help each other and go, yeah, when I was in your situation, this is what I did. So we've got about 370 of those meetings running around the country. And we launched the Yarn Smart one in December last year, and we're already up to 9 meetings. So, for me, that's what I'm most passionate about is, how can we create these safe spaces and, not judge our brothers and sisters that might be in, a place where they're struggling, with their recovery. But how do we, wrap that support around them? And, we know on average it takes 15 to 18 years for people to first reach out for help. I mean, imagine how much, we could save in terms of pain for the kids, for them, if we just got in a bit earlier. So that's probably the most shocking statistic, I think. I mean, the other one that you'd probably be shocked by is that only 13% of people in custody get any drug and alcohol support. I mean, that's just madness,
Oh, yeah. No,
absolute madness.
I got clean through the 12-step program.
Yeah,
I wouldn't well, I'm not clean by that standard anymore because I've done a lot of work on myself and I'm okay with whatever I do now at the moment. It's not interrupting my life like it used to.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I used to run H&I programs, NA programs in prison.
yeah.
And it was, um, yeah, hard work. And just say, like, I don't know what the solution is there, but just um, people aren't going and using drugs or abusing drugs, let's say, because everything's going really well and they're happy. And
Yeah.
then punishing them on top of that, it's just so compounding. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'm all about the early intervention and stopping people going back. So yeah.
Yeah, someone asked me recently, well, yeah, how would you define addiction? And I said, it's that problematic usage where it's impacting on someone's life. But the common thread that I've seen, and this is, the people who I love, who I've lost, to their addictions or are still here in recovery, it is pain and trauma. It's some kind of discomfort. It's, whether it is in intergenerational trauma, loss of culture, loss of language, or it's, loss of a job or a car accident, or we all go through challenging times, and it's not a lack of willpower or a lack of control. It's people don't have those tools. And I love when I hear people say, I went through AA, I went through to 12 steps, because it worked for them, and that's great. 30% of our clients do both SMART and AA. What I don't like is when I talk to people and go, oh, do you know Smart Recovery? And they go, no, I've never heard of it. And I'm like, well, we're not really giving people the power of choice if
Yeah, yeah.
they don't know. Because, we see AA in the movies and,
Yeah.
that's what people know. And, I think it's whatever works for people. But I think at the moment we have a system that is a bit reliant on people fumbling their way through and just trying to find something, and people get exhausted trying to get clean. And so many people we see at our meetings who these are people, like, they are committed, they're dedicated, they're doing everything they can, but just not getting the access to the services and supports they need. So I think the people who take those steps to try and get support are incredibly brave and resilient. And we've just got to get to a place where we don't have that stigma and shame and the labeling. I love your shirt. It's something we always talk about it at Smart. And even the word addiction, you can't really take addict out of that word. So I'm trying to not use addiction anymore, because as you say, a lot of people safely use drugs and alcohol. One of our tools, we do a cost benefit analysis. Of course, there's benefits of doing drugs and alcohol or gambling or any behavior, right? That's why we do it, because there's benefits. But it's when it becomes unhealthy, unsustainable, and it's impacting on someone's life, that, that's where people need support, which is a little bit different to the AA philosophy. But, I think there's room for all, as long as people get the support, however that happens for them, you know.
Oh yeah, and something that I'm really passionate about is, what I often say is division's the enemy. So like if Smart and NA or AA are arguing between each other, like it's off-putting everybody and
Yeah.
nobody's winning, the dealers are winning, if you will. But I believe there needs to be a myriad of pathways out of or into recovery, out of substance dependence and abuse. So yeah, whatever, what I've reconciled is what works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. However, there may be little things that I can take from you and that you can take from me. Even just knowing that what you're doing doesn't work for me, that's something. It's like,
And that's
that's not working. Where can I go?
Yeah, and that's the definition of peer support, right? Or
Yeah,
mentoring. Yeah, I'm also chair of Confit Pathways, where what we're really about is getting people with lived prison experience to mentor young people in the juvenile justice space. And as you said, some things might not resonate, but more than likely they will, because, hey, I've been in your situation, I've been in your shoes, and that's what smart recovery meetings are all about, is people just saying, well, you could be at the very start of your journey. Someone's, right at, maintenance phase. They've been clean for a few years. And, having those two people together is really powerful, because they can both teach each other things. There's that two-way kind
yeah,
of learning that happens.
yeah. No, it's such a valid point. What was the thing that surprised you the most about the work you're doing now, like in the role, and like what were you like, oh wow, I didn't sort of really realize that.
I think what surprised me the most was that smart recovery is really well known in the AOD, or the alcohol and other drug space, and really well respected. And, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. What surprised me, or what I didn't know, was that everyday Australians don't know what it is. So, that I've never spent so much time marketing in my life. I'm wearing the Smart Recovery shirt, as you can see, for this yarn. So I'm putting the brand out there. But, that probably did surprise me the most, because, and this is where I come back to what I said about the power of choice and access to services. If you don't know about it, I think that is the biggest barrier that we face as an organization, and why I'm spending so much time on, really trying to grow the brand. And as I said, I'm happy if people decide it's not for them, and they want to use another recovery support service, but they need to know about us first and foremost. That surprised me. And then the other thing, I guess, I've always lived my life experiencing discrimination. So, for me, being a black fella, you know, fair skinned black fella in particular, you get criticism, you get a different kind of racism. And, I'll acknowledge that the racism experienced by, my cousins and others in our community who are dark skinned is, extreme, and is a different kind of racism. And so I never kind of cry pour around,
Yeah,
because I've been privileged by my fairness as well. But I've experienced that, obviously, being a queer mum, in a rainbow family. I experienced discrimination. So growing up, I always experienced those things. But I think what surprised me in this role is the stigma in our country for our most vulnerable
yeah,
people. I
yeah,
think you experience discrimination, and having a dad who's been to prison, and having family in the justice space. There's judgment, there's all of that. But then, I think it is kind of individualistic, or it's in pockets. I think when it comes to drugs and alcohol and addiction, there's just this almost an othering that happens where it's like, well, that's, the black sheep of the family, or that's a problem over
Yeah.
there, or, you know, um,
Well, it's
there's a real,
universal. Like if it doesn't matter what family or sort of the color of your skin, if
yeah,
you're that person in that family, you're just like, that's the line you've crossed that you shouldn't have.
yeah. And so I think, and there's even that judgment from within the recovery community, right, towards people.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so as I said, whilst I've always been within a minority, and
yeah,
I've lived with judgment and, overt discrimination, covert discrimination. There's something else in our country around addiction that we have to rethink and we have to address. And it's the same with criminalized people and the justice space. And, those things are so interconnected. We're talking about the same people,
yeah,
So what I'm really wanting to focus a lot of my time on is how do we, create a narrative where it's not about the individual, but about us as a collective and as a community. And,
yeah,
what is resulting in, 1 in 20 Australians will suffer, an addiction or a substance use disorder. Yeah, it's I think that's the big thing that surprised me as well, is just that there's not a lot of funding for it. There's not a lot of attention on it. And yeah, I was probably a little bit naive about that coming in, having, always worked for Aboriginal organizations,
yeah.
always in these areas where, there is, racism, stigma, judgment. But yeah, it's something quite unique in the AOD space.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot what I was just going to ask you. What excites you about your work?
I think what excites me most about Smart Recovery Australia is um, the global nature of the work that we do. So I look after Australia and New Zealand, um, and we are rapidly growing around the world. You talked about before, addiction doesn't discriminate, and this is a global challenge. And I think what we're doing with Smart Recovery International, and here in Australia, and working with all the other countries, is like we're sharing and we're leveraging what's working. So we've now got a Smart Recovery app, which people can go to the Google, shop. They can go to the Apple Store and they can download it. But that app was actually originally developed in the US. And so I've been able to leverage that, and we were really fortunate to get some funding from NADA to add a youth component and a mob component. Um, and, it's that ability to think globally about an issue, but act locally, and then scale things that are happening around the world. That really excites me, because I think it comes back to that. This is a universal challenge. This isn't particular to the LGBTIQ community, particular to mob, or the COWD community, and, those diverse communities. It's something that affects everybody. So that really excites me. The late meetings with the US and the UK don't excite me, but apart from that, yeah, I think that's important for people to know that you're not the only one struggling, you're not the only one going through this, here in Australia, but all around the world as well.
And there's ways out of it. There's,
That's right.
don't need to keep struggling. That's what I was going to ask you. So yeah, I believe we have a very punitive, we have a punitive approach to a lot of things, and it's rippled throughout society. So it's all sort of fear-based and fear-driven. I haven't met anyone that will confirm this, as in academic or anything, but I think it feeds from our amygdala around that fight, flight, freeze. Sort of that's what we're always doing, scanning if we're safe. And the punitive approach allows us to feel like there's a juxtaposition, or misalign something, that we can feel safer because there's a war on drugs, and we can feel safer because we're going to punish these people because it's the wrong way. And what I'm trying to do at the moment and trying to advocate for is, how can we introduce humane practices into environments that are trauma inducive? So like prison, like other, where people are feeling and experiencing trauma, how can we be more humane? and treat people more humanely. And obviously, this is the work that you're doing is part of that.
Absolutely. I think when I think about our Inside Out program, which is the program we run in correctional centers, the beauty of it is that the boys or the girl, they run it themselves.
Mm.
It's the power of community. It's not because this is a mandated program that you
Yeah,
must do. It's actually facilitated by them for each other. And, obviously, I'd love for all those people not to be in custody and getting that support in community. And we make sure that it is a through care program. But I think, the prohibition, the criminalisation, all of these things that we've seen throughout history is absolutely around let's try and control, let's try and so for us, again, it's that abstinence approach versus self-management. It comes down to giving people the tools and self-determination to decide for themselves what's best for them, what's best for their family, and what's best for their community. And if you look at the national drug budget and how much money goes into police, courts, criminalisation, if we reinvested that into prevention and harm reduction, then we would get much better outcomes. And so, I think you're right in terms of this. It makes us feel safer, I think that's a big part of it. And it's a problem over there, and we're going
yeah,
to build walls around it. And, when really it comes down to that community, connection, country, culture, the lifestyle audit will holistically, are we healthy? Are we happy? That's the stuff we need to be tackling. And that's what justice reinvestment's all about, right? Like that's where we need to be putting the money, the funding, the support,
totally.
and our time and energy. So, for me, I spend a lot of time advocating around that. And not just because of the soft human outcomes, but the financial. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it was the Productivity Commission that said it was the cost of mental health, addiction, absenteeism is $270 billion. I mean, it just makes sense to, when you look at the cost, the disease burden of alcohol and all of these things, we'd all be a lot healthier and happier. And if we actually invested funding in prevention and harm reduction.
totally agree. We're getting close to the end. Where I'm in Sydney, where do I go to a meeting today?
Yeah, great question. So you literally go onto our website,
Yep,
you go find a meeting, you put in your postcode, and all the meetings will come up. So you can go in person,
yep,
or you can do it online. So just like we're having a yarn now, we're also happy people want to keep their camera off, if they're a little bit worried about stigma or being judged, you can keep your camera off. Our facilitators will try and encourage you to get to a point where you turn them on. But, it's the beauty of SMART is that you can find a men's meeting, you can find a women's
yeah,
meeting, find an LGBTIQ meeting. And everyone's there for the same reason, which is to say, I'm struggling, I need a bit of support, and just share ideas. We talk about, ideas, not advice. No one's going to tell you what to do.
yeah,
It's self-management. You'll leave that meeting with a 7-day plan, and that's your 7-day plan. It'll look different to mine. And, you can then come back the next week. How'd you go with your plan? You hold yourself accountable. And the beauty of each meeting is, you might be there for alcohol, someone else is there for cocaine, somebody else is there for gambling. It actually doesn't matter what you're there for. It's about the behavior that sits underneath. So you don't even need to say why you're coming,
yeah.
Um, it's just talking about, well, what's going on in your life? What are the things you can do? And there's some great tools on our website. Even if you're not feeling like you're ready for a meeting, you go to the find resources and the tools, and you can just download those and do them at home, get a bit of a feel before you come to a meeting as well.
Great soft introduction. I think that's been, didn't quite get to the technology component, but that's a great use of technology, a soft introduction, going to a meeting, having your camera on or off, whatever you feel like. I think it's a really valid point and a really great way to get people in. to
Yeah,
participate. And that's, the way that I work is let's create a safe space and take personal responsibility. So when I'm working with people and myself, because that's how it's worked, I don't hold myself accountable. I become personally responsible, not being held accountable, because that's a bit of a
that's
different
right.
thing. Yeah. So yeah, no, I thank you very much for your time because we are out of time. Uh, as I said
No,
it so quickly, and I could talk all day about this stuff. So yeah, really grateful for you giving us your time and grateful for the work that you do. So thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to tell us before we go?
no, just as you mentioned, if you want support, head to the website. If you're in recovery yourself and you want to give back to the community, you can actually train to run a meeting as well. So yeah, best place to do is head to the website and smartrecoveryaustralia.org.au, and yeah, all of the resources are there. So yeah, thanks for the yarn. Really enjoyed connecting in and yeah, sharing a bit about my story and the work we do at Smart Recovery.
Thank you very much, April. It's great. I did train as a facilitator, probably lapsed a bit, so I probably should come back. But yeah,
And
thank you very much. Take care. See you later.
see you.